raid you with some bass. Phones off.
Oh yeah, done that check.
Yeah.
Kia ora and welcome to the MPG Guitars Masterclass. Tonight we've got Chris van der Geer who's going to be moderating this one, and we've got Troy Kelly, Dave Rhodes and Clint Murphy who are just going to discuss a whole bunch of topics. Kia ora and welcome to the MPG Guitars Masterclass. And turn that off, doubling up. So basically, this is the 8th of our masterclasses. Hopefully you came along to the drum and bass one last week. This one's going back more into the analogy type realm. And suppose just a little extra thing for everyone starting off. The MPG is the Music Production Guild of Aotearoa. We're a group of people helping out the producers, engineers, live people and all that. So you can join us if you want. It's $100 a year and you get a whole load of things like mix contracts, producer contracts, session contracts. You get access to Serato Studio. What else do we get? All sorts of stuff. Mix assist. So if you're getting stuck on any of your mixes, you can send it through and we'll get an expert who knows your style to help out. You can also win lots of plugins. Including tonight we're sponsored by Melda Production, and we have as the prize, what is it, Emphatic, which is a guitar amp modeler. It's got a whole load of other effects. If you stay around to the end and if you get engaged on the chitty chat, you can win a copy of it. So I'm going to pass on to Chris now to take it from here, and I'll jump out and enjoy.
Thanks, Chris. Kia ora, Chris van der Geer, as Chris Chetland said. Really lucky tonight to have three great engineer producers, but completely and utterly knowledgeable in the guitar world. I'd love them to just do a little bit of intro for themselves. Troy, how about you start off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris, and really glad to be part of this webinar masterclass. My name's Troy Kelly. I own the Armory Studios in Wellington, and I've been recording since the 90s. Passionate about all things recording, especially guitars, which is why we're here. And I've worked on, I want to say every genre, but there's more than you've actually ever recorded. But I've worked on a really diverse range of music, from country, thinking guitars, country, all the way through to technical death metal. So I've had to look outside the box on a number of occasions on how to record guitars. So yeah, back to you, Chris.
Cool. Clint.
Hey, I'm Clint, and thanks guys for having me on board. It's cool to have my buddies here with me too. Troy mentioned about starting in the 90s, and actually, believe it or not, it was Troy who got me into this game. Actually, we went to school together.
Sorry.
He was like, there was a studio at the school, and he kind of told me about the whole thing and kind of headed me in the direction of SAE. So many years later, I'm sitting here talking to everyone here. But got pretty broad background. I mean, a lot of, probably 80% of what I do now is mixing. The other 20% production and recording. I have also New Zealand's only Dolby approved Atmos studio, so some cool things to talk about with guitars there. But I mean, I guess that's me. I'll pass it over to Dave.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I feel like we've all been around since we must have all started around the same time, and we've I think at some point all worked together on something. Um, Pretty crazy. There's a bit of a blind spot connection there. Obviously,
Yeah.
Clint and I worked on the first album, but even before that, when I was working on the very first version of Nil by Mouth, it was mastered by Chris Vandergeer. I don't know if you even remember that,
I
Chris.
do remember that actually,
Way
Dave.
back.
I was thinking about that today. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I started in the '90s as well. I started recording on a cassette 4-track when I was a teenager. Um, then studied at SAE and ended up working in studios. Been working in all sorts of studios ever since then. Um, like Troy, very much feel like I've probably recorded absolutely every possible thing imaginable at this point. Um, but I always come back to guitar music. It's just what I've always been passionate about. So, um, yeah, every different type of rock and metal and acoustic guitar possible. Um, yeah, in 2019, I gave up on Auckland and moved back to my hometown of Whitianga, where I have built this little studio. And yeah, I do all my mixing here, a lot of recording here, a lot of overdubs, but also travel around the country to bigger studios when I need a bit more space. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, a bit of background on me. Similar to like the other guys. Correction though from Dave, I'm definitely older than you fellas, so that's we won't go to exact age, but definitely older. But yeah, I started playing in bands when I was a teenager. I'm a guitarist, and I started a band called Second Child, which was a kind of alternative rock band through the '90s. We released a couple of records, and at the same time, I went to SAE the very first year it opened in Auckland, which was a little chaotic, but it was great because no one else wanted to use the studio, so I just used all the studio time I could. And from then, just started working as an engineer producer, initially at the lab in house in Auckland, and then freelance after that point. And then when my band Second Child split up at about 96, 97, I joined a band called Stella, and still been playing guitar for them ever since. We still play live, still recording a bit. So yeah, that's kind of my journey. These guys all failed to say that they're all really quite amazing and well decorated, award-winning engineers who have made a lot of amazing records, a lot of #1 records, international careers. So they didn't go into detail there, but I can assure you they absolutely know their stuff. Yeah, so we're here to talk about guitars, and I guess a little bit of just an intro thing on that. We'll be covering all aspects of it. We're going to talk about recording, production side, mixing. We'll probably veer off into other chats and other talks, but bear with us. Hopefully there'll be some good information for you all here. And I guess overall, guitar's kind of like it's kind of synonymous with rock music as such, and rock and roll. And from the start of rock and roll, it's seen as kind of what epitomizes that as an instrument. Since modern, what we'll term modern music started. It's a great tool for, I think it's some of the reason why it's become that way. It's a great tool for songwriting, and along with the piano, it's probably one of the only instruments that is a great solo accompaniment to a vocalist or a songwriter. So I think it's probably why it's become cemented as part of the beginning of rock and roll through to present day. So yeah, that's good on guitars. But let's get started talking about recording, because that's what we all like to do, right? So I guess some real basic stuff from recording, and I guess all these guys will probably back me up on this, but probably one thing we all agree on is recording and tracking is get your best source sounds possible. So in relation to guitars, I guess I'd be interested to see how you guys decide what guitar amp combo, what do you look for in a part when you're in engineering seat. How do you make that decision? Troy, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. So it really there's two things that come to mind with that. Obviously, genre is one, and the second one is what is the guitarist playing in terms of choosing your amp and the amp source. So it's really important to get to the bottom of those. This is just what I find, to get to the bottom of those two things, like um, what, first of all, the genre. So, are they, what kind of genre are they? Finding the right sound within that genre, because guitar sounds, as the range of guitar tones is so diverse. So someone could be talking about distortion, but there's so many layers to different types of distortion. So it's getting into that. That's the first thing, and then the second thing is their gear, and then do they have the gear that is the yeah, do they have the gear that matches the sound that they are looking for? So they both kind of cross pollinate those two aspects. I just think it's overall really important to not try and um, put your idea of what the sound should be on from the start. You should take some time to research where the artist is coming from within their genre, and then what their gear sounds like, and then go from there.
Yeah, man, I 100% agree on that. As far as when a band comes to you, a guitarist will already have a tone, and it might be a crap tone, or it might be a good tone. But I think rather than just pushing aside and saying we're using this, at least start with what they got. And when you put the guide tracks down and everything, you get to actually hear that go down. And then when it comes time to actually doing those guitar parts, I think it's a great idea to have an array of guitars, amps, things around. So, you can try things, and as soon as they pick up something and try something else, they'll know straight away whether they like their tone or not. And it can be kind of led that way without bullying them into, hey, we have to do it like this because I always use that amp and that guitar. Yeah.
Absolutely. It definitely comes from the sort of demoing stage as well. When they bring you a demo of a song, like what tones have they already got, and whether they like those tones. Sometimes they bring you something like, we hate these tones, we need something else, or sometimes it's the exact tone they're after. So, trying to figure out what's going to fit, like Troy said, with the genre and what's going to work with the song as well.
The, the one of the big things I find owning a commercial studio and having like walk-in bands, so bands that I'm not necessarily producing, is that they might like, let's say you've got like a thrash band, and they'll be like, okay, I want that 80s thrash sound, and then they'll walk in with like a solid state PV, and it's like far out, that does not sound like thrash, and they're like, yeah, I know. So then then that the gate is open to implement whatever tools you've got, but it's, and then you might get someone who's got that thrash, that amp that wants that thrash sound, and they play it and it sounds, should we say, not very desirable, but they want to use it, and then you have to go, okay, let's put one down, and then I'll show you how to get the sound that you want.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to do it, is to, like, rather than talk about the music, you just put the sound down, and then you put your killer sound down, and then it's like, okay, it becomes obvious then.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Yeah. And stemming from, I think, this thing, Chris, you're saying about like the source. There are so many things about the source of the sound. Obviously the player is the first thing. You need to have a good player, but that's always not, sometimes it's not possible. But yeah, like having those guitars, having a combination of guitars, like I would have, the classics like Tele, Strats, Les Pauls, whatever genre, if you've got a few different options there, but 100% making sure those are set up well, intonation, and new guitar strings, all those things are really, really important. And, because if you're recording out of tune guitars, you're not going anywhere. You know what I mean? All that stuff's really important, and that's where you need to guide those people. People just think, oh yeah, just plug into all this fancy amp sims or whatever, but there's so much comes from before it's even plugged in.
Yeah, I guess that's a good thing, like as far as helping us do our job, is exactly that thing, Clint, of you can make a producer engineer's job a lot easier by prepping well, and it's sort of, yeah, like you said, get intonation check before you go on new strings. Even if you don't have a lot of guitars yourself, borrow, steal them for that session, and amps, borrow them off friends, so that you have options. And sometimes you might run into that a guitar player that may want quite a modern dense sound, but they don't really know how to get it, and they might walk in with a semi-acoustic 335 or something, chuck it on net pickup, going into a tube screamer overdrive, and it's not gonna get that sound. And that's when you kind of have to maybe play some reference tracks or talk them around. So, well, okay, we're gonna switch to a PRS and this sample, whatever it might be, that will get the result they want. And you get musicians and guitarists, some who are absolute complete utter nerds about their tone and know everything and are great to work with and discuss those tones with, and others who have a great creative vision, great players, but might not necessarily know the outcome they want of how to get their sound. That's when obviously you're stepping in, you might be jumping between various guitars and amps until you nail that sound for them.
Yeah, and I've also found if you give someone the framework, whether they are a perceived good musician or a perceived average, or guitar wise, if you give them the framework like a tone to just play guitar, within a day they grow into something amazing. Like you can double track and do some things to make it sound good, but they have to be pretty bad for it to end up being bad. If you give them a good tone, you'd be
Yeah, and
really yeah.
I agree, and I think if you hand them an instrument that feels nice to play and sounds great straight away, that it inspires them to play better as well. Um, Sometimes they're struggling on an instrument that's not intonated well, or it's just not set up and it's horrible. You give them a nice instrument and suddenly they just play 10 times better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we're jumping forward here a little bit, but that is kind of stems from, for me, I get a lot of the time when I get stuff to mix, people say, oh, should I just record the DI and then you choose the amp later, or whatever. And I guess what kind of stemming off your conversation there, it's really important that they get the tone as they're playing, because they'll play differently. Like if it's super distorted, they'll just palm differently, or if it's clean, or if there's no compression on the guitar, and so. And the thing is, as you start layering as well, if you're putting down like a bed of really heavy left and right electric guitars, you kind of, when you put the next part on, you need to know what that first part is as well. Otherwise, like how do you choose these tones? And it goes right back to the drums too. Like if you get a great drum sound, you're kind of forced to put a really good bass sound on. And then the guitars, if you start recording small drums and then you'll record a small bass and then really small guitars, and then your whole thing sounds small. So you have to really make these decisions at the start, or as you're recording. I don't know what you guys think, and I don't know whether I've jumped forward, but I guess there's probably a lot of people out there that are using DIs into amp sims and stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that, because you can get tones the same way, but you can make those decisions on the way in.
I think a lot of people that use the amp sims and the DIs and stuff, there's no reason why they can't apply the same philosophy and actually find the tone they want and then just stick with it. They don't have to leave it a DI forever. You know what I mean? And because, like you said, as you start layering parts, if you haven't defined the first guitar tone and then you try and put something over the top, you don't really know where it fits unless you know what that tone is.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense to me when people send me DIs to mix that are like layers and multiple parts and stuff. I'm like, how does it fit together? I have no idea.
I think I had this discussion a couple of years ago, and I agree 100%. It's that thing where, because we are jumping ahead, we'll just be going back and forth between various things here, because obviously there's touched on a bit of production sort of situation, but that, especially if you're working with say a basic, what we call a rock 3-piece of drums, bass, guitar, that guitar sound is probably on the record is probably, along with say snare, swapping snares out the most variant, it's going to change the color of that whole record. And I think I've got a pet hate of what you sort of mentioned, Dave. It's like you can't treat your guitar sound as a plug-in or a decision to be made later. That's an inherent part of the genre and the production you're trying to achieve. So if that's got to be part of that setup that's leading to where the additional guitar parts are going to lead to where the vocalist is singing to. So sort of having a a workable bit of overdrive on it and go, oh, we'll sort out some really amazing dense guitar sound for the mix is not how we want to work, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think whether you're recording an amp sim or actual amps or heads with speaker sims or whatever, it's still exactly the same process. You need a great player, a good guitar that's in tune, and treat the recording the way you would like with pedals and stuff. If you're using pedals, I would use guitar pedals into that DI and then, kind of like print it as such. You know what I mean? Like treat that amp sim like it was an amp, drive it how you would normally drive it, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you guys do the same or not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
think
do have to also say I will keep a clean DI regardless,
Yeah, me
because
too.
you never
So
know. There might be an
why
emergency.
why do you clean? Why do you keep a clean DI though?
Partly for editing, it's much easier to edit if I can see the spiky waveform as opposed to the high gain
Yeah, yeah,
sausage.
that's exactly why I
Um,
I, I do it, use it, keep it as well.
and very rare occasions I might want to swap out a tone, but it's rare, and it's just peace of mind, I guess.
But yeah, the situation probably was about 3 or 4 months ago. I mixed a track which actually was similar to what I brought up before. The kind of main, it was kind of almost a 90s style modern rock rhythm part that had, and to me it sounded like it had been recorded on the neck pickup, and it sounded kind of warm and fuzzy and fat, but it was kind of like quite a bad, harsh, um, and undefined distortion sound. But luckily, engineer had recorded DI, so that was where I actually dumped the recorded amp sound and completely went with a sim on that DI, so I could get it into more of a crunchy, brighter sound. Which even though the guitar has still been recorded on the neck pickup, at least through the software amp, I could get it closer to the tone that was needed.
Yes, but I mean, did it still sound good? Did it still sound how you wanted in the end? Because it's a neck pickup on the wrong
Yeah,
pickup,
yeah,
right?
yeah. It was better. It was better than what the amp
What they
actually.
had. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was an improvement, but no, it wasn't ideal.
Did you find in
Again,
that situation that if you EQ'd the DI before you went into the amp sim, you could get it closer to a bridge pickup sound?
helped a little bit. Cut some low mids out, so it wasn't as thick there. That did work, but I think it's what we're saying. It's sort of be aware of the genre you're after. So it's a bit of research as a guitarist yourself, how to get those tones, or if you're a producer or an engineer working with a guitar band, do that research yourself. Talk to them about sounds they're after. Listen to tracks. Research what particular guitar was it, single coil, a humbucker, what amp might they've used, all those things, so that when you're in the studio, you can, what I talked about before, you may need to guide them towards what they need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're talking about a mixing scenario where you've been given something and you can't change it, but like in the recording scenario, I guess we're all in the same boat that we know what all these different guitars sound like. We know what a tele sounds like compared to a Strat. So it's easy for us to say, oh, this would be better with a tele sound. But what I would say to those people that don't know the ins and outs of all the guitars, etc., is don't dwell too much on trying to chase sounds forever, and like just get something down that excites you and excites the player. And if you start layering stuff and start recording more stuff and that guitar part's not working, just ditch it and redo it with a different tone, and you'll know straight away what the new tone should be as well.
Yeah, it's true. It is, it's surprising how much people try to fix something that's already recorded when it's actually really fast to just record it again.
Just re-record
Yeah,
the thing,
true.
man. Yeah, yeah. Depending on the player, right? We've all had
Well,
those
yeah,
players.
okay.
Go just one thing just quickly, just to dial back to the DI, and then we'll put it to bed. But I think we should all agree that everyone should always record a DI, right?
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I do
This,
anyway.
well,
Yeah.
some people don't, so I think it's a given. The second thing I would say with the DI that's really cool is if you're looking at your career as a producer in a longer form, it's really cool to bank a library of DIs and take notes of what those guitars are. So when you get a nice amp or a nice rig, you can go back and reamp them and compare them to those original amp sounds and do some homework with your gear. Like I've done that. I've got libraries of DIs, and when I get a new head in here and sometimes on lunch breaks, I'm like, man, that guitar sounds mean. What's it like with a different guitar through it? And while the band's out having lunch, I'll just run a DI through it to have a listen, because the way I record is always reamped live. So I think that's another really good reason to have a DI always recorded, because you can collect them and have a library of DIs.
Yeah,
That is
it's
such
actually
a nerdy thing, man. Love that. I love it.
yeah,
Oh, it's
it's
so sick.
I like the
It's
fact
so
that on your lunch break you record, like, play with
Yeah.
DIs.
Yeah.
I run vocals. My favorite thing is talking about guitars. One of my favorite things to do is run the vocals from whatever we're recording through the guitar amp here as a rule. I'll just run it, and
Oh,
then
do
you've
you?
got
Okay. But
yeah.
how do you then tune it, Troy?
Before you put it through then.
Yeah.
Of course.
But yeah, I think it's funny. Like, yeah, probably a good tip to that DI aspect. I think probably the same Troy's. I think well, especially going to my very early start, there was no software amp sims. You know, it was just only analog amps, and then also when I
Yeah.
initially started on 24 track,
Yeah.
you couldn't afford to have a DI, so that was never part
Yeah.
of my
Yeah.
initial tracking scenario or production scenario. Whereas, yeah, now totally makes sense to do that. You've got the
Yeah.
the DAW, as many tracks as you want. So as a
Yeah.
safety for yourself to reamp, or for an engineer or a mixer to get it later, it's probably a really good go-to tip, right?
Yeah. And it's
I
also
mean, there's a lot of, like, with the DI, there's some really cool things you can do. Like, I do a lot of work with quite out there bands like Enter Shikari, where the guitars are all supposed to be mangled and weird, right? So we do weird things like get the DI and then throw the DI through Little Alter Boy and change the formant and then put it through amps and do, like, for like weird stuff. You can do other cool things with just the DI if you've got a really bad player. It's much easier to time stretch and move a DI and then reamp it, if you need to. Obviously, getting a good player is a good idea, but if you are struggling, like if you're doing that with an audio signal, it's actually, like a mic signal. It's harder to get away with, like, stretching and pitching and stuff sometimes, I find. I don't know about you. If you guys try that stuff?
Yep. Yeah, definitely easier for time stretching, especially. Seems to work better on the clean DI, and then you can reamp it. Yeah.
Yeah, because especially if you're doing, we'll probably get into this, but if you're multi-miking something, like got two mics on something, like a 57 and something else, you can't really stretch them both at the same time. Otherwise, you get the phase problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Actually, probably good little segue into miking. Huh?
I have a little
Oh,
workaround
yeah, I
for
did that.
What's that, Dave? Sorry.
well, just in relation to what you're saying, Clint, I have a slight workaround for that time stretching when you've got two things that need to be time stretched, and this is going to go with the multi-miking, right? So generally, what I'll do if I've got more than one microphone, I'll sum it down to one track. So I'll get the balance of the mics how I want it. That goes to a single track, and the DI goes to another track, and I record them onto the left and right of a stereo track in Pro Tools.
Yep.
And then using the down mixer plugin as the first insert, and then you just mute the DI. So what you end up with is there's no way to accidentally edit one without the other, because they're on the stereo track together.
That's
and
cool.
Also, if you time stretch them, they stay, because Pro Tools thinks of it as a stereo track, so it doesn't mess up the phase.
Ah, that's cool. I like that.
And then because you've got the down mixer plugin on, it changes the channel fader in Pro Tools to a mono channel, so you've just got a single pan, and it doesn't behave like a stereo channel.
Like a stereo channel. That's cool.
It's a really nice. I find it's a really nice kind of worker. I don't know if you can do it in any other DAW, but in Pro Tools, it's a really nice workaround to keep a DI and a microphone signal locked together across multiple playlists and edits and whatever. And yeah,
I actually use that, Dave, for doing like up to 3 mics, because if you do say a dynamic and a condenser and a DI, you can do a 3-lane channel. So I'll do that as well.
Amazing. I've tried that, but the down mixer plugin doesn't work when you do that. You have to? How do you?
Oh no, it works for me. Yep. You just have 3 lanes, and you just mute the 2 you don't want, and you just listen to the
Oh, no way. I've tried that. It didn't work, but I'll try it again. Great.
So yeah,
Maybe-
multiple miking. I mean, who chucks and thoughts in it? Is it like, often is you got is it two as a go-to? Are you adding a third in? Your back mic and cabinets? And obviously from even what you guys just talked about then, it sounds like, I 100% agree, is if 2 or 3 mics really want to sum them to one recorded channel. I don't want, again, it's like we're talking about with the software decision, I don't want to be sitting there in the mix or later on running, 5 mics of the left, 5 mics of the right hand double track part, 5 mics of the center one, then the clean part in the verse has got 5 tracks, and suddenly it's just a mess. So again, it's making that decision, like straight up going, well, this is our guitar sound. And going back to an old console recording of using preamps on a console, Clint I used to do, on the York Street Neve, you just bring mics down, go, okay, let's have balance, get the sit right, and then subgroup that off to your input channel, and that's your recorded track, right?
Yeah, I mean
But
that's great. There is one exception with that, is I have mixed quite a few records where people do the multi-miking. So if people know, but I don't know if you can see my finger, but you got 2 mics and their capsules. If the sound doesn't hit the capsule at the same time on those mics, you get some weird kind of EQ comb filtering stuff, right? So I sometimes, well, a lot of the time, prefer, like, if I know who the client is and what kind of level of, like, if they're a bit more of an at-home client, I'm like, record the DI and both mics separately. Yeah, so, but that's good to have a relationship. But for like I guess the more advanced, engineers, producers, like making sure that your mics are in phase and stuff like that. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think there's many folks though that have got the facilities to sum anyway. A lot of people are using
True. Yeah.
interfaces and that kind of stuff. So coming up with a scenario to manage, like never use more than 2. I think that's a good rule. I mean, if you're using more than 2 mics, you probably need to change the guitar or the head or something.
What if you've
You
got
know.
2 cabs running
Yeah,
simultaneously?
I'll
Then
come
you've
back
got
to you on that
4.
one. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. That's
Okay,
absolutely
okay.
fine. Because
This,
you get, I'm talking about like 3 mics on well, okay, there's a side story here. 3 mics on one speaker, or the other rule I've got with the side story is never mic 2 different speakers unless you really know what you're doing with phase, because the speakers will never actually move the same. So people will put a mic on 2 different speakers and think they've got it right, and then you listen back to it and you can clearly hear that it's not in phase as well. So be real careful if you're miking different speakers and trying to combine them. You could pan them, that will certainly help with the phase. But
Do,
yeah, I go.
do
Oh,
you
sorry.
think we should, for those people that don't know about why you would use 2 mics, kind of just quickly
totally.
explain
I think
that?
that's exactly what I think. Want to get really great to get your thoughts on that. Yeah, why do you make that decision? Use 2 mics.
Well, I don't want to, yeah, I mean, I'll just say what I use and you guys can say, but I pretty much always use a 57 and a Royal 121. I've probably got something here. And the reason I do that is the 57's got that classic mid-rangey tone, but it doesn't have a fatness to it. Whereas the Roy ribbon has that fatness in the weight. So rather than trying to EQ in low end or boost low end into the guitar amp, like I always use one of these clips. I haven't got the 57 here, but the Roya goes basically on there, and then the 57 goes right next to it, and then you can basically get it in phase and just move it around. So that's kind of pretty much what I would do. I don't know what you guys do.
I would absolutely do that if I had a Roya available. There's always a 57 available, but not always the Roya. So if not the Roya, possibly another ribbon or possibly a condenser for the same reasoning, but possibly
Yeah,
different.
well, just 2 different tones, right?
Yeah, two different tones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And in that scenario, an expensive ribbon is not a have to have, because you're getting a lot of the mid-range and definition
Yep.
from the 57. If you're doing heavy, fast music, you probably don't even need too much ribbon. If you're doing more classic stuff, you really do want the ribbon for the low end. But it's not. You don't have to go out and you don't have to buy a Roya to get you that breadth. I've used some real shitty
Yep.
ribbons on people that turn up and they just want to have their amp at like, you know, 100 decibels, and it's like, okay, I'm not putting $1,000 microphone in front of that, and I'll put a real shitty one up, and I'll always be surprised that it's actually all right. In fact, on a lot of rock stuff, like classic rock, it started out of, I will say, being a bit like, I want to say lazy, but just like I can't deal with having to do heaps of track management. I'll just put a Royer up and EQ it, sorry, ribbon up and EQ it on the way in, and you go to mix and you're like, this is amazing. So you don't have to always use two as well, right? I mean, you
Yep.
probably have
Yep.
definitely used a good sounding ribbon EQ'd on a classic rock album.
Yeah, but even like
Um,
if, like I say, a 57, man, it's a classic. It's been around forever. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
I've actually started to really, really love 57s as I get further down this path.
I think most of it seems like going back to like a ribbon, and I used to use a 67 a lot with a 57. And there's sometimes a little bit of Sennheiser 421 mixed in, but I think what everyone's getting at is 57, which definitely that would be, I guess, if for everyone out there, a 57 would be a go-to guitar mic. If you have to get something, it's probably
Yep.
your safest bet to cover
But
off
don't
what you need. But some like a Roya or a 67 or whatever, that's often because sometimes we get a little bit more mid-range character. There's something a little bit more detailed and throaty about it. Sometimes it's which is why we use the other mics, really, right?
Yeah, and I'll just quickly interrupt there and say it's also really important to, before you go judging the way a 57 sounds, play it with the track. Don't just sit there and listen to the
Yeah,
guitar
good
and
point.
try and imagine the sound, because it'll probably sound pretty shitty. Like it won't have a lot of bottom end. Um, it won't be sizzly up high, but when you put it on the track, it sounds incredible. And if you go and put a really expensive condenser on a guitar amp, the first thing that you're going to do as a mixer when you mix it, take off everything below 90 hertz, probably take some high end off, and you're going back down to that 57-ish area anyway. So the 57 does kind of sculpt the noise that's coming at it in the direction of what you're going to want for a guitar.
Yeah, I just want to point out something Troy said there. I think is really important. What's important to me is that I never listen to any sound on its own ever. So
Yeah.
I will get the guitar tone going, like the sound working, and then I'll get the guitarist play while the track's going with everything in there, including a really good guide vocal. And whilst they're just learning the part and getting familiar with it and the tone, I can be messing with pedals, whatever. And so, yeah, you're getting the right tone for the song. It's not, it's like those people that spend like 4 hours EQing a bass drum, it's like on its own. It's never, that bass drum is never going to be on its own ever.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
no room left for anything else by that stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And then how sort of you guys make decisions on like placement of the mics with cones? On you going center cone, edge, when do you move it and why? What are you looking for in those moving the mics? And yeah, Clint, I think do you still use like a white noise method at all?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic for me because with like something I've really realized as I've become an old man now, is how much the speaker plays a massive role in sound. Like, I mean, it seems like an obvious one, right? But like, I used to always just chuck it in the center of the speaker. But then as I started using amp sims and stuff, and I'm moving the amp sim thing around, I'm like, man, the sound's really changing. Like, and I kind of knew this anyway, but it's really hard to do when the amp's at full noise and you're sitting in there, like move it. You can't really hear that. So, I guess my starting point is, yeah, microphones in the center of the cone, and then I get them to play. And if it feels too bright, it could be the guitar, the telly or something. It could be the amp. If it's still not working, then I know that if I move it off the center into the side, it gets warmer and thicker. You know what I mean? So if you have that kind of understanding of the relationship with everything, you can make adjustments, but I would always have the amp in the room with me so I can make those adjustments by hearing them through the speaker, because you can't hear when you're out in the room just with a really loud speaker. It's going to sound amazing anyway because it's full noise, So, um, yeah, and I guess I'll just touch on that white noising thing, like what Chris was asking about is what I used to do is feed white noise out into, and I still do this, I feed white noise out into an amp, and then if I'm using multiple mics, I can bring that white noise back into the console and play it through headphones, and I can actually get the two mics and kind of like line up the capsules. I don't need to do that so much anymore that I use this kind of device, but it is really handy when you're using multiple guitar cabinets, and we'll probably get into this maybe later on, but one thing, like for example, I like to do is have like if it's a really heavy band, I like to have like that really heavy amp, but then I'll have like a Vox or something like that that's cleaner. And then having those two sounds, I can combine those sounds, but you need to make sure that the phase relationship between those two amps is working. So by playing white noise out both amps at the same time, and then phase reversing one of the amps into the headphones, you can kind of go and kind of like make it so it cancels out completely, and then you know that when you put those two signals together that we're in phase. I've just kind of gone somewhere completely crazy with
No, I
that.
think that's great.
I don't know whether I got too technical or not,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'll let someone else speak now.
I'll just quickly explain from the start, and I'll try and keep it to like a minute what Clint means. So what you can do is with a plugin in Pro Tools is you can run pink noise, white noise, all sorts of different signals, and he will play it out of a send inside Pro Tools like on your interface through the reamper through into the amp, and then you put headphones on. Usually Clint might do a little bit differently, but you can put headphones on, and on your headphone mixer you can send just the 57 to your headphones, and when you put it on the cab you can hear basically the loudest white noise. So just as like, or would it be like, so you're going for, and then you grab the other mic, and what you typically do is you put this one out of phase, and you try and make it so that the other one cancels out. And then when you flip this one back in phase, boom, you've got the tightest sound ever. And what happens is after you do that like 400 times and you lose your hearing for 10 minutes afterwards, you just go stuff it. I kind of know where it needs to be now.
Yeah, that's it, right? You just
2 minutes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I had this thing when quite a few years ago now. Do you remember all the rage for a little while there? Those microphone robots that could move the microphone around.
Yeah.
You had an
Yeah.
app on your phone and you could move it around.
Yeah.
So I got one of those.
Do you use it?
After about 2 months of using it, I realized that every single time the mic ended up in the same place.
Which was where?
Right on the edge of the dust cap.
Oh yeah.
Right.
That's funny because, like, you say that position. When I use these amp sims, I always find I prefer the sound when it's right on the edge of the dust cap. So maybe I need to just start putting my mic there.
Do you find with that clip? So if I use that clip with the 121 like you've got in your hands, I find that I put the 57 on the edge of the dust cap, but the 121 in the center of the speaker.
Yeah,
that
it's a bit
seems to
brighter.
be the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
Is that where you end up?
Yeah,
when you say the
pretty
center?
much. Yeah,
Right.
pretty much.
Interesting.
I mean, I think you put a mic in front of a good guitar amp, like you say, like Troy said, you put a 57 in front of, a guitar amp, and if it doesn't sound right, it's usually the guitar or the player or the part, right? The part. Yeah.
That's one of the good things about using a 57 all the time, though, is you know straight away that it's not the 57 because you know exactly what the 57 is going to sound like.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm also a really advocate for it's cool to be super technical and think about all this stuff, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun to just capture a moment and just put a ribbon mic in front of an amp and go and have a listen to it and go, does it sound like a guitar? Yes. Okay, cool. Let's move on and just capture some sound, unless it sounds really bad,
I totally agree. And I also think that a lot of what we're talking about, especially in my case, I'm talking about heavy guitar tones, high gain stuff, or like loud rock stuff. If I'm doing a clean guitar tone, I might do something completely different. And oftentimes I might have a ribbon or even a condenser, like, away from the amp, not even right up against it, because I want a bit more just vibey space.
One of the coolest clean kind of blues sounds I got I realized at the end of the day the owner's dog had walked in and knocked the 57 180 and it was facing into the room. And that was the point where I was like, okay, I'm trying way too hard.
Yeah.
It was
It's
a
like when
killer.
you, when you
But I didn't even notice it because the amp was so loud. So sorry, Clint. It wasn't like it was roomy. It just was big, you know?
yeah. So when you start your song and then you get to the end of the song and the tones change and one of the mics is just slowly be going down, right?
No one tells you. I'm like,
Yeah.
that happens a lot. You're like, you'd think that they'd tell you.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, sorry. That's normally when someone's playing acoustic, that's what happens. You know, I'm out
Yeah.
there with two drumsticks trying to tighten the
yeah.
stand up.
I mean, we're
Oh,
talking
sorry.
about you're talking about different guitar tones there, and I think it's good to branch out to that because I mean, I'm not always doing heavy stuff, you know, I do a lot of clean stuff, but I pretty much use the same technique for all genres, really. The only thing that really changes is kind of what pedals I use and what head I use, or you know what I mean? Like it seems that
Yeah.
I don't really use room mics unless I want the guitar to be some crazy kind of room thing. A lot of people, you know, they might put the close mic on one side of the speaker and put the room on the other, but to me that just makes the guitar less wide and less big.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of room mics on guitars, really.
I find with room mics, and this sounds super obvious, it totally depends on the room. Like it's completely pointless in my little room here. It just sounds pretty much the same, but not as good as when I put it up. But if I'm in a studio that's got a lovely acoustic and I'm after an ambient guitar sound, then it can work. Uh, Tends to work best for me when it's a single guitar on its own rather than a multi-track, a double
Yeah,
right
yep,
type thing.
definitely, yeah.
I think well, it's about yes, going at production isn't about the part, and I think you talk about like if you're going for modern heavy dense tones, that'll probably never work. None of us would ever consider putting a room mic up, but like you're saying, Clint, you know, might have one even in a modern rock project, you might have a really cool chorusy, murky, uni vibe clean part in a verse, and that might be perfect to have a room mic or a ribbon mic 6 feet back, and you're going, well, I want to actually create an unusual character sound, but you know, never work on the main high gain parts.
Yeah, but see, even for those clean, cool sounds that you want roomy guitar sounds, I reckon I would say 0.005% of the time I would use a room mic. Like I'm all in for using spring reverbs into guitar amps, using the
Yeah.
spring reverbs on guitars. I use lots of pedals. Pedals are like my bag. Like I use pretty much, there's not really a guitar record without a pedal, really. Whether it be some sort of compression pedal, some sort of reverb pedal, some sort of drive, some sort of fuzz.
Yep.
And I think that's for me, it's like that's where I get my signature tones because they're not just an amp through it. I mean, there is a place for a guitar through an amp, but if you want to create something different,
With the room thing, I think it is what Chris was saying too. It is the part as well. Like if I'm doing a say a reggae band with a skank in it, you put that on a concrete floor and get a bit of distance on the mic, and all of a sudden it'll sound, for lack of a better description, like UK. You know, so you can kind of do that, but definitely not with the heavy stuff. There's just no room for it. With your pedals thing though, Clint, a really good one for people to try. It depends on your DAW and how it works, but if you're recording a guitar and you're recording the DI and you have the uh, availability to reamp, you can use pedals in your DAW before your amplifier. So you could like use your neural DSPs, your any guitar plugin that has pedals. I do that quite a lot. I'll record a DI. Like actually, we were doing it this week, and we wanted a like one of the whammy pedal. I jokingly said, "Oh, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a whammy pedal pitch shifty thing here?" And then I googled it. What plugin is a whammy? And it came up with Waves,
bullshit.
and I was like, yeah, yeah. No, Waves GTR3, and I pulled it up and fed it, and we had the sound in like 30 seconds. So
Oh, sweet.
you know, so you can kind of do that stuff with DIs, and
Yeah.
like you can cheat the plugin process like you do with plugins if you need to. So It's
I think
yeah,
this is the cool thing about modern recording compared to like when we all started in the 90s and stuff, really. Like there was a sort of set of parameters that you had to follow for most rock and pop music in a way, you know what I mean? And like now it's anything goes, and if it sounds a bit mental, it's perfect, you know, and that's what I quite like. So if you like what you're saying with the plugins and just doing whatever you want, as long as you get a vibe of it, like it's, you know, if you get in the vibe and the band's vibing and it sounds killer, it doesn't really
yep.
matter.
Well, there's the whole thing too of as soon as you say, oh, let's try this with a pedal, you can kiss goodbye. Like, unless you've got a good setup, you can kiss goodbye like half an hour of someone getting a pedal board and pulling pedals off and then trying to get AC cables to work. It's like quite often I'll say that, and I know that I've got a window to go and make a coffee, you know?
Yeah, people always come in with their pedal boards, and by the time I finish, like it's
Yeah.
just all, you know, they're all proud of their tidy pedal board, but then by the end, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should do before and after photos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going on some crazy
Okay.
tangents here, Chris. What are we?
That's all right. We're going
Get us on track.
Get us back on track, fellas. It's
Yeah.
still about recording, and this is kind of a bit, you know, as when you're engineering or producing, you're in there with a band or a guitarist, and you're laying those parts down. What's some real simple tips or ideas when how do you get that guitarist comfortable? I mean, monitoring wise, personally, when I'm laying guitar parts down, I want to hear my guitar pretty much at what I would have it in the
And
final mix.
volume.
Yeah, well, no, it's actually I kind of want it like as far as in relationship to the rest of the mix. I want it to kind of sit how it should, and then probably slightly tucked under from that. So I feel that I'm pushing through the rest of the stuff. I don't want to be like really loud to go. I can hear myself clearly. I want to know that I'm working with the drums and the bass and any synths or keys parts. I don't want to go. I just want to hear myself real loud. You know, it's I want to have to feel like I fight through a bit, and I feel that changes the way I play. And so
I think
when I work with a guitarist, I'll start. That's my starting point for monitoring volume for them, and then I will always, as I'm tracking parts down, I want that. Like you're talking about before, Clint, is a volume thing. Is it's at a point where it's not crazy loud, but it's energy loud. Like, hey, this is I
Getting
get
a
some
vibe.
feel from it. Yeah, and then as soon as I finish recording that guitarist for that take, it's straight to go dim on the console or what my monitoring back or listening volume is. So, but that kind of recording volume has to be a point where I want that guitar player to feel kind of excited about what they're playing to.
Yeah, for sure. I
I
mean,
mean, I'm happy to jump in here, but if I don't know,
yeah, go for it, man. Go.
I I think it's really important to have the guitarist in the room with you, like in the control room. And this probably happens a lot these days anyway, because people are just plugging into amp sims or whatever. But a lot of guitarists would like play out in their amp, you know, like out there. But I think for communication, it's easier. They can hear what the guitar sounds like at the end of the day, like what it's actually going to sound like. One issue you have is that often guitarists want it really loud, you know, and it's crushing to have that volume going in your ears 20 when you're doing this as a day job as we are, you know. So a good little trick there is to actually give them headphones in the room as well, so they can actually get their own extra volume, or just have one off or something is quite a good little technique that I have. But then I think you need to really understand, like a lot of guitarists, you need to know where they're at ability wise, and if they're not performing very well, you need to figure out what they need to make that performance better. Whether it's, if their timing's bad, they need to maybe, you know, like have more drums, for example. Pretty obvious, but I'll let someone else jump in here.
No, I totally agree. I generally always like to have the guitarist in the room with me for the communication and just being able to, you know, if they're having trouble, being able to be right there and fix it for them. But also so they can hear the tone of what's actually being recorded. Because when they're standing in front of the amp, it's, you know, anybody's guess really. It's interesting, Chris, that you keep your guitars quite low in the mix. I wonder if that is your producer brain working on yourself, because most guitarists are telling me to turn it up.
Yeah, well, it's that thing where it's kind of at mixed volume, then tucked down maybe 2-3 dB from that.
I would
Like
love that. I would love to do that. That sounds
it
perfect
makes
to me.
sense to me, like
Yeah.
for that to be the way to do it. Because like Clint's saying, I I want to feel part of the track, so I know how it's going to sit in the end and what I need to do. And also, yeah, for timing reasons. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think, I mean, it's the same deal when you got a guitarist going, I just want to be it, tune me up, it's me, me, me. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And
it's
then the
like,
timing goes
how
out.
are you playing to this track? You know,
Yeah.
what are you actually listening to here? So, you know, I think it's, in some people, again, it's like when we're talking about guitar tones as well. Sometimes you need to guide people because they don't quite, when you go, oh, what do you need? Oh, turn my guitar up, but they don't really know that they need lots of kick drum and the snare to actually keep in the pocket. So it's up to you to kind of go, hey, let's try this and see how that works. And like Clint's saying, you've got to read them as a player. Is the take feeling right to you? Actually, they need to hear the bass because there's those notes locked in at the end of the verse that they're not hearing in the run they're doing, you know? So it's knowing when to adjust the volume for them, right?
For sure. I usually have them on one side as well and have their guitar pan to that side. So they're hearing themselves right there in front of the speaker. And I can still hear the full mix because I'm in the center. So I can judge how it's working with the other guitars and other parts and stuff. That seems to work well. It doesn't work well if they're panned on the other side and they're not hearing the guitar they're actually playing. So simple stuff like that.
One
Yeah.
thing I always do, I do exactly what you just said, Dave, is I will, as a rule, turn off all the room mics on the drum kit, just get it really punchy, because you don't want to be. I find myself drifting out listening to the drum production, like, oh, this is cool, and then I'm like, oh, what did we just record? You know, because I'm still a music lover at the end of the day, you know. Um, and I
You're
do
wondering
have
what snare sample you can add. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have the guitars. I have the guitars quite loud because I find that when I'm doing heavy guitar production, that is, that I really want to hear the tuning. I really want to hear when they hit a chord and it's been held for a few beats. If the the swell of the notes doing that rather than that, you know, I want to hear the speakers do all the stuff together, and I have to have it quite loud for that. And so I actually have guitarists asking me to turn the whole mix down, and I'm like, hey, you know, so it does, you do sometimes, you know, have it too loud, but it's really important to, on heavy guitar stuff where you're doing like left and rights, like Dave was just talking about, focus on the tuning. The tuning is the
I,
key, right?
I reckon people over the years are used to listening to music quieter because when there was just studios, it was just loud all the time.
Yeah.
And now because people record in their bedrooms, they don't have that, you know. And I think people have got
Yep.
better, like younger people have got better at playing their parts without full volume. I don't know if you
Interesting.
have found the same.
Yep.
Good theory.
Good for our ears, that's for sure.
Well, that's
You know,
well, it's probably because people are used to iPhone volumes or in-ear volumes. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Mm.
yeah, it's not obnoxiously loud. I don't know how loud I monitor actually, like on a meter, but I like to
You
get
can't
the
hear it at the
ear.
end of the day.
Yeah.
Hey, hey, nah, I like to feel it. Like I like to enjoy it.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I always have my earplugs handy for those times when the guitarist just wants it stupid loud.
Oh,
It's hard to
really?
hear
I
double
can
tracks
actually
though,
hear
isn't it,
them.
when you do that? I always
What's that?
find it's hard to hear a double tracked guitar when you
Yeah.
got when your earplugs in.
Well,
That would
it's,
be.
it's hard to hear in general, Clint, when you got
Oh
headphones,
yeah,
right,
yeah, I
isn't it?
know, I know.
Basic.
I think that's a headphone situation there, Dave.
Yeah,
If
that's
Yeah.
someone
true.
if
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
wants it that loud, you got to go. That's cool. Just throw in some headphones and
yeah,
yeah, let them go for it.
Yeah, that's quite a good tip on that one, Clint, because I've never actually done that, like giving them headphones on top of, because I actually hate monitoring really loud, like really loud.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I got a
That was a
real
Gil Norton tip. That one. That's what he
right.
used to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I'd like to know what really we should discuss later date what really loud is. I'm interested now.
Yeah. Probably it's
Well,
probably quieter than you think, Troy.
I'm gonna say,
Yeah.
based on the size of the speakers I see behind you compared to these little guys, I think you might be louder than me.
And okay,
Yeah, it's
while we're
not a
on
competition.
guitar mics, I mean, obviously we've been talking about our electronic-y plugged-in electric guitars, but let's acoustics.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I kind of again when I talked initially about guitars, I mean, acoustic guitar, the original guitar, right? And
Yep.
a great accompaniment to songwriting, to a vocalist, and but still, you know, essential item for so many records and projects. How it fits in with other guitars, with when you use it with electrics or other approaches with it. But yeah, what's some thoughts
I think we
on?
need to go on for
Well,
some quick fire.
I think so.
I've got one for this just quickly because
Yep.
I've recorded so many acoustics over the years, having studied jazz and then done
Of
so
course.
many acoustic records. I got so tired of the phase issue, talking about phase on guitars, that I got so tired of the phase issue on acoustics that I sat down one day and was like, I have to work out how to sort this out because you I always wanted the bottom end of a ribbon, but the definition of a condenser, say, and a guitar, if an acoustic guitar moves this much, you're out of phase with the mics just by the nature of where the mics are. So and I'm not trying to sell a product, but I bought this microphone called a Townsend Labs, which is basically just a mic modeler. You get them from the rock shop, and it's one microphone and has software. And what I do is, and it's just insane, it works every single time. And a couple of times I felt like I was cheating with a high profile artist, so I'd put up two microphones. And after half an hour, I was like, I'm sorry, man, I have to pull this down and put up my usual. And what you can do is you can duplicate the track. So you're recording one microphone and it records in 360. It uses two channels, but then you can with those two channels, you can say, okay, I want this one to be a 451 and I want this one to be a Roya, and they're in phase. And what you lose for not being 100% authentic, you gain so much more in phase, and you can balance them, you can do whatever you want, and it sounds ridiculous. And I've even gone as far as changing the microphones in the mix. So you might have a certain couple of mics up for the intro or whatever, and when the chorus kicks in, you're like, oh, actually, now I want to change the microphone. So as far as acoustics go, and if you're trying to find a really simple, not so simple, but an elegant solution to what can be years of losing your mind, I really recommend that sort of approach.
Cool.
That's a cool tip. Yeah.
Oh,
I,
wow.
Yes.
I reckon, like, just like the 57 for me, the KM84, the Neumann
Yeah.
KM84 works really well. I do put two mics up, usually a KM84 and like a U67, like a large diaphragm, and I put the capsules right together. But I would say, and I kind of mix, I record both, but usually it's the same thing. Listening to it in the mix, the KM84 is a little bit small and a bit mid-rangey, but it pokes out really well. And it works for mandolin, it works for all kind like acoustics, nylon, yeah, so much for
They're,
me anyway.
they are one of the nicest pencils, unfortunately, very, very expensive, but they are ridiculous. I have a pair, and they yeah, that on any, yeah, I mean, we're talking about some beautiful microphones, but do you find if someone moves, you can hear one goes out of phase? Like, say you've got the 67 here and they move, and then the 84 gets closer to the neck. It's like
No, because I have them literally like right next to each other. And when I record the acoustic and I make sure that they're sitting in the right spot and moving around, I actually get another mic stand. I don't know if I'm in the shot, and like put that mic stand where the neck of the guitar is, and like, so when you
yeah.
tune or whatever and you move around, the head of your neck goes on there, so they know.
I
Because
actually
it's so
tape.
easy for
Nice.
them to
I
like
put
Nice.
adjust
I
their
put
headphones, and then they're like, you know,
I put tape on the floor. I'm like, this is where your feet go, man, and this is where the
yeah,
12th fret is. Especially if you're doing like 4 or 5 days long. People will
yeah.
sit and move their chair, and then you're
Yeah,
wondering
or
why
they
does that?
cross their legs and they lift the acoustic up. It's just, yeah.
Nightmare, right?
What about you,
Oh
Dave?
yeah,
What are you using?
Yeah, similar. I don't always have a KM84 at my disposal, but if I did, I would. But yeah, usually a pencil and a large diaphragm together. I really like the Aston Spirit as a large diaphragm, which is a fairly inexpensive mic, which I picked up along the way, and it actually sounds great. It gets enough of the brightness, but not harsh. Just a nice clear brightness, but a nice chunky low end as well.
Yeah.
I generally, if I'm using two mics, it's probably going to be two condensers in an XY for like a picking part. If it's a strumming part, I'll usually just go with a single large diaphragm. I feel like
yeah.
if it's a big strumming thing, I don't need all of that detail. I just need it
Yeah.
to sound chunky and yeah.
Yeah, the technique I was talking about, I guess, is when you've got a solo acoustic, like it's a
Yeah.
singer-songwriter, and you've got a singer
That's a
and
cool. I'd like to try this idea, Troy. I reckon it'd be awesome, actually.
Yeah.
yeah.
As far as acoustic instruments, I think just as important for me is the compressors. So,
Oh, yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty much always running through a distressor. and because it's such a percussive instrument, and you got to be really careful about how you compress and know how to compress. But I would always, go
The
through.
LA2A mode? Is it the LA2A
I was
mode?
just gonna say, I generally go for my LA2A.
Do
I
you?
really
See,
like
I
it.
don't
No
like an
strumming sound.
LA2A.
Yeah, no good.
LA2, I don't like compressors that are slow, and that is like so slow. Um, my settings on a distressor are 4717. That's
Well,
it.
there you
Everything.
go.
That's the pin number to my
That's it.
card as well.
I'm writing that shit down.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
4717.
1407. I'm close.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. I got my attack on 10, not 7.
Do you? No,
Yeah.
oh, have you? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
if the worse the guitarist acoustic, the more the attack goes quicker. Yeah.
Well, I think
At least you want to hear.
about
My
miking is
biggest problem with that is, the more you compress them, the more all of the bloody squeaky chair noises and clothing and rustling and all that shit gets louder and louder.
I'm only talking like 3 or 4 dB max.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
just the peaks. The
Yeah.
thing with the distressor too is that on most of the settings on a distressor, it comes out the other side. It's quite hard to describe unless you've used one for a long time and then not used it. It just rounds everything out. So an acoustic is quite brittle, thin sounding instrument by design. And I can imagine, the way that the distressors just round out the transients and give it some just de-harshing it a little bit, I'd imagine, Clint?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think things dependent, like we're talking, and it comes out of that genre, isn't it? Like, sure, you're talking about a solo folk record or a lone solo acoustic record is a totally different approach to how you might record
Yeah,
it
right.
for a backing
Yeah.
chorus on, say, a pop track, and how it's going
Yeah.
to sit. That could be double tracked, and you might be
100%.
scooping some mids out, if that more toppy end percussion shimmery sound.
Yeah.
And maybe you might want something, a ribbon and warm as full as you can get it, because it's got to hold that whole music, this holding the whole music element of the mix, right? So
Yeah.
different approaches for genre, for sure.
And actually, one thing that is worth mentioning too, when you are recording acoustic, sometimes you're also recording a vocalist. And there's a great technique that I'm sure that both Clint and Dave use, which is just putting both mics on figure of 8 and trying to rotate the mics so that the dead spot, so the null, so that on a figure of 8 microphone like this, that's the null, is like on the guitar mic is facing the singer's voice, and on the voice is facing the guitar. Just by doing that, you'll I want to say safely like 40 to 50% reduction in the off axis, the other person or the other thing,
Yeah.
the singing,
Yeah.
So if you're doing that and you haven't tried the figure of 8 technique, it will stop you sweating so much when you turn up that vocal mic when you're recording an acoustic and
Yeah.
vocal at the same time.
You're a brave man, Troy, man. I just by all means just try and avoid doing that together.
I also
I
find
I
Troy,
do a lot.
I'll add to that, Troy. Another thing that's really helpful, because it's the phase problems between those two mics that really kill me. As long as the balance isn't wildly up. But that Melda production company that's sponsoring this video, they make a plugin called M Auto Align. And if you've recorded those two mics, it's the same. It does the same thing as the Sound Radix
Auto line, yeah.
whatever. But it's just much cheaper, and I've had it for years. It works brilliantly at time aligning those two mics, and the whole thing
I
comes
think
alive after that.
the tendency when you're recording a singer-songwriter singing in that at the same time is to put the vocal mic right up on the vocals, because you're thinking, I need to get as much vocals as I can. But in reality, if you keep the phase between the mics the same as the singer, the phase is all in, and then you're actually as loud as you need.
That's cool. I like that.
So don't dig it in. But that's another tangent. But I thought if we're talking about acoustic, there's lots of people that record acoustic, and I didn't discover that technique till like a good decade in. And you can actually put reverb on the singing when you're doing do that technique, as opposed to putting reverb on the vocals and all you hear is the guitar spluttering out, and you don't even have reverb on the guitar mic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's talk
So
about a
we've
bit
got
about.
2 minutes, don't we, Chris? What we need
So
some.
we're definitely.
Oh, sorry.
You know, we just, over time, we'll rein it in a bit here. This is actually great though. Some awesome tips I've picked up. It's brilliant. And I'm just going to move on. We've discussed some of the stuff along the way, but putting a bit more into the production side as a producer when you approach guitar parts. You heard us talking before, listeners about double tracking. When do you make those calls to double track? I mean, and by double tracking, most people know it's like when you get the player to play the exact same part again. Generally, all of us here probably with guitars, especially working with heavier rock or heavier denser guitars, rather when you might double track vocals, which you often might leave them in mono, you're basically filling out that main vocal again so it sounds naturally chorusy or fuller. With double tracking guitars, we're talking about going hard left right to get complete width in the mix and to keep it away from kick, snare, vocal, and bass in the center. And so I sort of want to talk about when you make a decision to double track, how you might approach pre-production a bit with the band, and you might have to move fairly quickly through this, and how you work on arranging some guitar parts. Like when a guitarist comes in, how do you go, this is going to be double track, this is the main part, and when you make those calls or not.
All right.
Dave?
Well, we'll just.
Here you go, Troy.
I was just going to quick fire around and say, unless you're doing a very detailed pre-production plan, which is not most of the time, you generally I just call it on the day. I'm like, okay, this is a heavy song. We've got a fuzz tone. We're just going to double, and there's a clean in the breakdown, and we just discuss it and record, and move on. I think I don't go into too much detail like that in pre-production because everything kind of changes as you record drums and bass and you grow the song. And I find that if you mention too much detail in pre-production, you can kind of get held to it. And I like to grow with the song. And I think another one too, and I'll leave it here after this, is I really like, rather than just left and right, I like doubling the left and doubling the right.
Okay.
And then and you have to watch your tuning, but then you're really in Chugtown, it sounds really good.
Are you using the exact same tone for all four of those?
Project dependent, but most of the time what I'll actually do is set up two different sounding amps, and we call it quad tracking. So you're doing two takes but getting four layers. So you got,
Right.
yeah, and then that way, so it's kind of, you've got two takes, one's on the left with one amp, but those same two takes are on a different amp on the other side. So you don't have to do it four times, if that makes
Okay.
sense. So you're doing it twice, two different amps on each side.
For me, quad tracking is going to be four different tracks, four played.
Yeah, right.
Tracks. And in that case, I'd have a left and right of one tone and a left and right of something else complementary. I feel like four of the exact same tone might not be. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'd achieve by doing that.
It's pretty loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same with you, Dave. I might say it'll be in the chorus. But say their main guitar part is a rhythm guitar, whether it's just power chords or whatever. And then in the chorus, I might try and chunk that out somehow. So it could be them playing just the low octave roots going through some mental fuzz pedal like the Honey Badger, where you're
That's a goodie.
where you're putting some crazy low end fuzz, and and then it might be like Troy says, you just decide to, hey, maybe we need a clean part or an arpeggio over top. But often a tally, tally twanging down low amongst something else is quite cool. So changing tones like that is a good idea.
But the question, sorry, going back to the question, because I think I took us on a path here, is do you in pre-production sit down and talk about guitar layers, or do you do the let's grow with the song in the studio and let it happen?
A lot of the artists that I work with have pretty massively formed demos, and that is part of the problem. So they have so many layers in there already, and you need to decide what to take out or just to enhance. So a lot of the time parts are there, but I will always usually add extra layers of chunk and stuff like that, but I don't talk about it until we do it. You know what I mean?
I think as a probably a general answer to that is no, you have an idea and you discuss the tone, and we know the techniques to get that tone, but you go with the flow on the session.
Yeah, we're basically making up on the spot, right?
Yeah,
But
of course.
we have the ability to be able to do that and hear things and make judgment. And I think one of the biggest things for everyone, whether it comes to recording, mixing, whatever it is, and it's cliche, but you got to use your ears. Don't just rely on, oh, I need a mic pre, I need this or whatever. Like, you listen to it. If you get a vibe and you like it, it's great. If
Yeah.
it's not, change it. If
And I
it
think
sounds,
your idea you're talking about, like, I think good thing to touch on for people at home is to make a guitar part or a guitar arrangement more interesting is that thing of, yeah, may have main power chord part, but yeah, that thing of even really subtly being on maybe a really clean twang with a little bit of chorus on. You know, if you pull it out, you notice it, but
yeah,
it's there. And I think suddenly that can really excite the guitar player because they're going, okay, I need it heavy. It's still heavy, but there's suddenly a little bit more color and ear interests by having just that other thing. But it's, you know, those things you balance up where when you mute it, it feels boring, but you don't really hear it. You know, you get it to
Well,
that volume, it's adding something.
that's that whole thing of embellishing one part to sound like it can hold the weight of the song
Yeah.
instead of heaps of new ideas. And then you've got all this battle on your hands. So it's like building up one tone with multiple layers. And that comes back to that whole thing right at the start of this of like there are some genres that's what has to happen to get the tone that the artist is imagining. So you have to help them to understand that when you put down one part or you listen to your guitar, it's not going to sound like that part. We actually have to do a double or, you know, whatever and put a clean one in the middle and that's your sound. That's the sound we're talking about. So it's like you almost need to say, give me a minute and give me half an hour and I'll show you where we can get this to, you know, and then go from there.
What's you guys' thoughts on when working with, you know, we're talking a lot of, obviously being the guitar, we concentrate a lot on rock and a lot of things about heavy guitar tones that turned up in the conversation, but when you're working with hybrid music, or and it could be just general pop or more of an electronica synth-based music where living with guitars, and it could be, you know, you get situations of very dense guitars still, but with electronica, or it could be more electronic based and the guitars providing maybe more interest parts or color. How do you approach that differently from a lone guitar only project?
yeah, I mean, I'd say this is probably the more of the genre that I work in all the time. And I really like guitars to sound like keyboards. And so when you listen to it, like the guitar, it's like, oh, that's a cool keyboard part, but it's actually a guitar, you know? So like really using like the pedals and sounds to make an iconic, interesting sound, not just um, you know, a boring guitar part. That's kind of my whole vibe. Is where you're crossing the border between is it a guitar or not, you know?
Yeah. Dave?
Um, I don't do a lot of that as much as Clint does, but sometimes I get sent that stuff to mix, and it's always an interesting challenge trying to fit it all together. And so usually what I'll do is I'll kind of get the rhythm section happening, and then make sure the vocal is sounding killer, and then I'll build everything else, the guitars and keys and stuff around the vocal. Whereas if it was a guitar track, I'd probably have a pretty good idea of what I wanted the guitars to sound like.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always going to have a vocal in there, but I'll tend to work on the vocal more on a pop thing, or not necessarily pop, but electronic rock kind of thing, before I start worrying about all the rest of the instrumentation around it.
I think you'll find with those kind of tracks, the guitars aren't as loud and dominant from like a gain point of view, and like the vocal needs to sit right there, and the
Yeah.
rhythm and the drums need to be banging, and the sub needs to be killer. So I'm not saying like mix everything and then put the guitars in. Like I literally, when it comes to mixing, push the vocal up first, and then I just start pushing everything up, guitars included. But you will find that the guitars usually take. You need to the guitars are what eats up everything else that has sometimes the interesting things in a way. Like, well, not interesting, but there will be guitar parts that are interesting sounds, but just normal rhythm guitars won't be really doing too much for a track like that.
Yeah. I just find I kind of learned for me that's sort of the area which I sort of end up working or not sacrificing, but making the biggest calls on is that low mids, because it's if you're working with a lot of like pads or synth pads, and you know, you might have a awesome preset or synth patch used, and that's designed to be this massive one thing in an electronic track, and so it's set up to be full frequency, just carrying a whole lot of weight by itself. And then the guitar loom is the same thing. So at some point I'm deciding, okay, what part's gonna carry that area? Is the pads and the synth gonna be flat the low mids, so then I'll thin out the guitars a bit, or I'm gonna leave the guitars there and synths are gonna be more airy and upper mids or something, They could be, I'm making a decision on what will hold that particular frequency area in the mix.
Yeah, and that's a real production decision that needs to be made during the recording process. And I think that a lot of people make that mistake of just throwing a guitar part down, or throwing it, like, it needs to be very well thought out.
Yeah.
Every part on every record needs to be thought out and not just throwing ideas down, to be honest.
One of the really important parts of working with electronic music and should we say heavy guitars, is the bottom end. And like, you depending on the part, if the guitar's not isolated too much, if it's always working with the guitars, if the guitars are usually always working with the keys, you can shave a considerable amount of bottom end off the guitars, and you won't actually hear it because the synths are in that region. I mean, obviously, if the synths stop and the guitars chug out, it's not gonna work. So, or you're gonna hear it. So I think it's quite impressive how much low end you can cut off a distorted guitar in an electronic track. I've done a little bit of music, like commercial music, but a lot of games, and you can really, really take a lot of bottom end off. The other thing I would say is, if you are doing that genre, is it generally has like no dynamic range. So automation is pretty much what you guys were just dabbling in, and that's the key. Is you just got to think, what's that thing that you want to be hearing, and as you listen through the song, just always make that thing come to the front, um, and you'll win the battle. If you're just trying to park everything in and limit everything and make everything sound good, with electronic music, technically it's just going to be a nightmare, because it's a wall of every frequency, especially with keys, synths and pads, and I can think of all the arpeggios and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you got to really automate it.
And how about like mix wise? What are any sort of key quick tips for how you approach guitar mixing? Like any clean up bottom end EQ wise? Are you like Clint? It sounds like you're really happy to track a lot of pedals and effects down at the time. What effects do you leave to mix? Are you leaving modulation or reverbs to later, or if the part's formed fully with that guitar player, you'll track it all down as it is with effects at the time?
I use like reverbs and delay. I use a lot of all my delays usually come from within the box, Echo Boy. Um, a lot of my nicer sounding reverbs or whatever, but often I'll put like a reverb pedal on a guitar, say it's like a country twangy guitar or something, and then that'll go to a small room and maybe a larger room, reverb wise. But I think the key thing with the mixing is, rather than just jumping for EQ and jumping for all these things, like, you really have to balance everything first and get that vocal sounding right first, and then like, make the guitar sit around there. And it's funny, like, from over the years I find myself doing less things in my mixing than I used to. Like, so less EQ, less, but when I am applying it, often it might be quite extreme, but I just know that that thing needs something extreme. But rather than just like, okay, I need to EQ that guitar and that guitar. And I mean, I just opened up a session I was mixing today, and I was like, it's sounding great, and I was just like, really doesn't really need much EQ on the guitars at all, so you need to be able to make those decisions. It's a hard thing to do, trusting your ears.
I think a lot of that comes back to your decisions you've made when you're tracking, though. So and I find the same thing with when I'm mixing my own stuff. The guitars usually don't need a huge amount of help in the mix, because that's how I tracked them, to fit in the mix already.
Yeah.
When I get sent stuff, it can be sometimes amazing, especially if it's come from like someone working with a plugin and they've loaded up a preset that's the exact sound they wanted, and you get and you're like, well, there's nothing to do to this. It's already done. It's already mixed, basically. And then sometimes you get stuff that's just wildly wrong, and an incredibly extreme EQ and some more distortion might be what it needs. So yeah, but I agree with you. I'm doing a lot less. It feels like if I get the drums, actually, you know what? If I get the bass right, then there's a lot less to be done to the guitar, especially with heavy stuff. Getting the growliness of the bass right seems to be a huge amount of the heaviness of the guitars comes from there.
Sure, Troy's got a bit to say about the bass.
I
Is
was
bass a
going to
guitar?
say,
Are we grouping that in that or not?
No, I'm afraid I'm put a ban on that tonight. You know, that's
yeah.
where,
No,
um,
I was going to say I would almost advise everyone to work really hard towards not using digital EQs to boost guitar tones. Like
absolutely.
when you, yeah, they just there's a couple of um ones I'd be okay with. You know, there's a API by UAD that's not too bad. But generally, if you just start boosting guitars in it with a plugin, it never really pays off. I mean, obviously you have to sometimes, but just try so hard to low cut and put it in the mix somewhere, and or try to get your recordings so you don't have to EQ boost wise. I think in the long term you'll really appreciate how much better it sounds. I don't know what you guys think, but I always find when I boost, like if I boost with a digital plugin, I end up feeling like it's just too bright or too thin, or it just
Yeah.
starts to sound non-guitar-y.
Well, I kind of think I totally agree, Troy. I think there's that. I think in any mix, and I'm talking about say a massive hybrid session with live drums, loops, keys, percussion, whatever going on, guitars. The guitar is the one main thing that I like to EQ the least. I think what Dave was saying is making sure that production and tracking side, because I agree, when you're trying to fix something or get a guitar to be brighter, you should have nailed that drive or that tone at start. You know, that's because it never bodes well. You start to bring up a lot of noise that's unnecessary, or you can get some thickness out of it or try and cut it, but you kind of really want, I think it's the one instrument you really need to try and get as close to finished tone at source.
Yeah, I mean that's in an ideal world too, you know, like things happen, you have to EQ. The thing to remember, you know, what I'm trying to say is people like the amount of sessions that I get from people to mix, and there's Pro Q on it, and it looks like looks like Batman's helmet, you know, and it's like,
Yeah, I
what
don't
are you
get that. Why
doing?
do people do that?
Yeah,
And then
Like
you
all
turn
these
it
like
off.
notching out.
I know. You turn it off and you're like, there's a guitar sound. Were they just
Yeah,
notching out the sound? Were they just notching out the sound of their desk that the speakers are sitting on? I don't
I
know.
reckon
But
they look at the graphs and they go, that one's really bumped up. I should pull that down. That one's bumped up. I should pull that down. You know, I think that's what
yeah,
happened.
that's what I'm trying to explain. And the other thing I would add to that is that you've also got to remember there's going to be so much EQ on this by the end anyway. It's going to get mastered. It's probably going to go to, you know, it's just going to get hammered. Like it's going to have EQ on it. So, you know, just try not to EQ the guitars too much.
I
Yeah, guys, I
generally,
think
when I'm EQing guitars, I'll use much more broader. In fact, I don't even like EQs where I can see. Like I'm mostly using the SSL channel these days because it doesn't, you know, you just turn it and yeah, all right, fine.
Cool.
But
Hi.
yeah, the
Hey.
graphs are the ruiner of everything. Sorry, carry on.
Mr. Chetland,
Cool.
can you jump back in?
Yeah,
Otherwise?
we're starting to
Yeah.
run out of time. Got a couple of quick questions.
Oh,
One from
We have to
Logie.
finish at 9.
You can go a bit longer. There's no hardcore rules. It's, you know, music industry. What's your obligation as producer to push a guitar sound if the artist is adamant on their not so great tone? Anyone want to do a quick answer for that?
We'll kind of cover that at the start a little bit.
Yeah.
My kind of what I said is you put their adamant guitar sound down and go, cool, that's a great one. Can we just try a couple of options here? And if they argue about it, you know, at the end of the day, it's their record. You can't, you know, tell them
Yeah.
what they can't do. But you know, put your idea down, A/B it, and if they go, yeah, you're right, and if you are right, they'll start trusting you from here on in for the rest of the record.
Cool. And recording with Reverb Live or adding it in later with a plugin? Thoughts on that?
most
Live.
of the time live. Most of the time live. I really like spring reverbs. Like if it's a part that wants a reverb on it, I really like amp spring reverbs because it sounds like a guitar reverb. But yeah, it's hard. It's very hard to. I've never found a plugin that sounds like a spring reverb.
Cool.
Like an actual.
I always say, do you want reverb with your drums?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Next one, Chris.
Next one is any recommendations on a budget-friendly ribbon mic?
Don't ask me, man. I just like
I-
expensive stuff.
The hell's it called? Hang on.
That's the
Budget
best
friendly
one.
though. This is, trust me, this is this is my bag. Budget friendly can mean
Do you like these?
probably could mean $80. The SCs. I haven't tried that one.
I really like it. The VR1, SE VR1.
How much is that worth?
Can't remember.
Under a grand?
I think it's under a grand.
Speak to
Yeah.
Troy, whoever that is. Speak to Troy. He's got loads. Yeah,
He's
like hit him up
loads.
online afterwards. He's got everything you'll need.
Cool.
Yeah. What if you do buy a ribbon, just look after it because they're expensive to fix. That's what I'd say.
Mm.
Yeah.
The pain in Dave's face.
I know.
Cool. Well, I think that's probably. Has anyone got anything else they want to say, or any little last words of wisdom, favorite little things, or are we good?
I would just say enjoy the process. You know, like when you're setting up a guitar amp, try some of the things we've talked about. You know, like don't feel too much pressure. It is really hard, and learning guitar tone if you're not a guitarist is quite a long journey. The amount of different types of distortions and the definitions of distortion is insane. Like I don't think any of us would claim to know all the different types of distortion. So you got to look at it like a long form thing. It's not that it's hard, but there's just a lot to it.
Yeah, I think if you can, we sort of touched on this too. Get familiar with what different guitars sound like. That's really important. And if you can have an array of guitars, that would be the one thing over everything, I would say, rather than a microphone or a mic pre or whatever. Have a couple of different guitars, and that's going to really change the sound.
Yeah. I agree.
And you can also, with the pickups is a big thing too. You don't have to go and buy a really expensive guitar. You can buy a mid-range guitar and research the pickups and change the pickups out and, hot rod that thing to be a studio beast.
Cool. Anyone else got anything, or we can do the prize draw now?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Okay. Our winner tonight is
Drum roll.
Greg Haber.
Logie. Logie Verification. So if you can give us an email to the info@mpgnz.co.nz, we will get you your license for the Melda Production Emphatic plugin, so you can play around with different amps and convolution reverbs and compressors. And yeah, I said, yeah, they got a lot of good stuff on the Melda things, so they're always worth a dive, as Dave knows from their aligning plugin. So yeah, thanks everyone. That was cool, guys. If you want to stay on for a second, and I'll just stop the stream, and everyone can get on with the rest of their nights.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
That's great.
See ya.